This menace must be confronted.
After nearly 2 weeks of threatening military action against Syria, strikes that appeared imminent, it is remarkable for a president to hit the pause button for a congressional vote. But that's exactly what Mr. Obama is doing. Without Great Britain or the United Nations backing him on Syria, Congress may now be his best bet for political support.
Over the last several days, we've heard from members of Congress who want their voices to be heard. I absolutely agree. So this morning I spoke with all 4 congressional leaders, and they've agreed to schedule a debate and then a vote as soon as Congress come back into session.
Now joining me here in Atlanta is Jason Johnson. He is a professor of political science at Hiram College, and in Columbia, South Carolina, Caton Dawson, a national Republican consultant and former chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. Jason, I will start with you. You're here right with me. First off, can you talk a little bit about the problems that this is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination? President Obama is facing bipartisan opposition to this.
Right. It's going to be really strange. I mean, this is a long punt because he's saying basically Congress is going to have to make a decision. And he's got really a lot of different arguments in Congress. There are Republicans who don't like this, Democrats who don't like this. Everyone who's running for president in 2016 is trying to figure out what their speech and debate will be. This is by no means over. And I don't really know what Obama's strategy was in trying something like this. This could last for weeks.
So what was his strategy, do you think, Caton? Is he punting, or is he, I don't know, passing the buck? Or is he punting, passing the buck, or is he being deliberate?
I think it was extremely clumsy. Both the vice president and the president certainly haven't sold the American public that we need another conflict. He did connect the dots with Israel's security. He didn't mention Iran and the imminent threat we have there with the nuclear weapons on the horizon. And it was just clumsy. And I think the American people, especially going into the 2014 cycle where we know that the House is fairly secure with the Republican majority and the Senate's going to be in play. So what he's done politically is thrown the Senate question up there. And now that we've gone ahead and paused and going to wait a minute and let's go see and go through the process, after we've lost, after they've spent 100,000 plus lives, 1,500 plus on chemical weapons, it is clumsy. I will give the president credit for calling their bluff after he drew the red line in the sand about using chemical weapons. But I think there's a lot of confusion among the American public. Now we're going to mix the politics with it, and we're going to send it to Congress, and it's going to get more confusing and more awkward because our country is war-weary. They'll support a president if he states the case in a clear objective, but I think what I find out there among my colleagues and friends is we're tired of entering a conflict that we can't see a strategy where we can win it. And no one wants to just go drop a few Hellfire missiles or cruise missiles and back on out and say, we got you for a little while. And that's what the clumsiness is. So, you know, I understand what's going on here. It's going to be a long, protracted process while the Syrian rebels and everybody's fighting. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to be clumsy and awkward.
And Jason, let's talk about the calendar here. This is something that I personally find perplexing. Congress doesn't return, or at least the House does not return until a week from tomorrow. The White House is not, the president is not talking about calling them back early. He has an international trip ahead of him this week, including to Sweden, which you could argue, I mean, the G20, you can kind of understand why he goes. Sweden may be more of a social visit. What is with this timeline, and is he serious if he is going away throughout the week this week instead of twisting arms with Congress?
Well, I think part of this is also Obama's general reticence about getting involved. I mean, he thinks that there's a moral case, but he knows that the country is weary. He knows that this is expensive. He knows that it's complicated, and that's why it's partially a punt. He's going to be out of town. This is now squarely in the lap of Boehner and squarely in the lap of McCain and all the congressional Republicans and Democrats who've been chirping from the sidelines. Now they're going to have to deal with this, and Obama gets to escape. So again, that's part of what he's doing here.
Caton, what do you think if Congress says no and the president still goes ahead? What does that look like for him?
Well, I think that might be the president's end game here, because if the seriousness is there, the American people have always backed up a president in this type of crisis, in my opinion. And the fact is that he's going overseas or going to play golf or whatever the president's going to do. Anytime you're asking Congress this big a question, best thing you ought to do is stay home and talk to them. And right now, I think Congress is going to have a long, hard discussion, but remember, we're now mixing in 2014 and 2016 politics. And there are going to be a lot of people on TV stating their case out there to the public, a lot of politicians. So I think the president's making some bad choices.
And don't forget, Congress was supposed to come back, right? And what were they going to be dealing with? Making sure the government stays funded, making sure that the U.S. doesn't hit its debt ceiling. So already had their work cut out for them. Professor Jason Johnson, Kate and Dawson, thanks, guys, for being with us.
Thank
Victor,
you.
over to you.
Thank you, Brianna. Let's
Thank
broaden
you.
the